Hey y'all! Well, I'm excited to start a new video series that is totally off topic for this channel, but it is on topic. And it's going to be building my new listing room workshop out in my backyard. And I want to just kind of go through what I feel like is kind of the first steps to doing this kind of thing. First of all, you need to figure out what the construction costs are in your area for a building of the quality that you want to do. And I've talked to a couple of architects and a couple of contractors that work in the Atlanta area, and they gave me their dollar per square foot that they estimate building something like this would be. And the key is they know how to average the construction costs, because obviously just building the flooring in the center of a room is a lot cheaper than building the wall is, and that's all a lot cheaper than building a bathroom if you're going to include that, or a kitchen, which I'm not going to be doing, but you're going to have the plumbing in it. It's got to have the electrical and all that stuff. And that's all kind of calculated up into this formula that they have. And, it kind of scales with the size of the building. And they know how to do that sort of thing. And so that's kind of the first balancing act you have to do, is you have to figure out what do you have to spend? And then how much is it going to cost? And that cost per square foot is probably going to determine, in large part, the size of the building that you're going to be able to build. In my case, I want to build not just a approximately 15 by 25, which those dimensions may change, going to have a 10-foot ceiling room, but I also want to move my workshop out there in that same building. So basically, I'm going to build it with 2 rooms. And I'm hoping to include a small bathroom so that when I'm out there, nature calls, don't have to trek across the yard back into my other house. And the idea of this is potentially in the future, 10 or 15 years from now, when I feel like I need to downsize, I can turn that into an ADU and that sort of thing. So anyway, you know what your plans are. You may just want to do a listing room, and you don't have a nice one in your house, or your significant other doesn't like the speakers out in the room or wants them shoved up against the wall, or they don't like the way cables look or whatever, and it would be nice just to have your own space for your audio listening, and you're kind of at that point where, hey, I can make this big purchase of equipment, or I can make a really nice room. And I think at some point, the improvement in the room is going to outweigh or provide more improvement than upgrading what may be pretty decent gear already. If you know what I'm saying, that little bit there versus this on getting a really nice room. So back to the decision trees on figuring all this stuff out. Next thing you really need to take into consideration before you decide on I want to build this size thing, is you need to see what your local building codes allow. And if you live in a city, or God forbid you live in an HOA, you probably can't do anything. But some cities are really restrictive on what they allow as far as secondary structures on a building and where they can be placed. And I was on the city council here in Doraville where I live, and so I know there's a lot of code around that sort of thing, and setbacks on how far they have to be from the property line and all that stuff. And eventually you're going to need a survey, but that's not a cheap deal. That's probably going to be $1,000 or so, maybe even $1,500 to get one with elevations and all that in it, and showing the water drainage and stuff that you're going to need. But to start with, you can go to the county and it's going to have a map of your lot. And especially if you're in an urban area, it's probably going to show where your house is on the property in relation to the property lines. And print that up, and it's going to show the footages too, at least mine does. It'll show how wide it is at the front and back, if it's not a square lot, and then how deep it goes, that sort of thing. And then try to do as close to a scale drawing as you can, and then go to your local building department or the city hall or whoever, the planning department or whatever. Most of them are so happy that people come to them first before you do anything else and say, what am I allowed to do? Can I build something sort of like this? And explain what you're doing. And that's what they're paid to be there for, is to look at what you're planning on doing and tell you what the codes are, show you where it is in the book, because your average citizen doesn't know what Municode is or know where to look up any of this stuff. And again, that's why they're there. So I went and talked to them. Our city has regulations on accessory buildings that they can be up to 1/2 of the square footage of the main house, which if this is a 1,500 square foot house, I can build a 750 square foot building, but it can't be over 800 square feet no matter how big the house is. And so you're going to have those kind of limitations on what you can build on your property, unless you're, out in the country or something where there's no regulations like this, but you need to know what they are, because you don't want to build something illegal, and you do not want to build something like this without any permits, especially if they're required. Again, if you live out in the country where there's kind of the Wild West on building stuff, you could probably do whatever you want. But if you live in any kind of urban area, there's going to be building permits required, and there are probably going to be permits for like the construction, the electrical, the plumbing, and all that HVAC. All that stuff's going to have to be permitted and inspected and all that kind of stuff. And so you need to be prepared for that, and they can give you some estimations on what all those permit fees are going to be, so you can include those into the estimated costs of doing the construction. Okay, so those are like the first two things. And then just have some fun with it. Kind of think about like what you want to do with the building. Do you want to make it where it can be adaptable to other uses? There's some questions that already came up. It's like, do you want to put it on a slab or do you want to put it on a crawl space? And there's some advantages to both. One of the things that I'm also engaging the services of two different audioticians. One of them is a guy that does like system setup and speaker setups that's well renowned, and he worked under this guy whose name was Jim Smith, who's wrote some books on setup and stuff, and he's agreed to be a consultant on this. And you need to understand that these folks that do this stuff, most of them don't just do it for fun. They're I probably give away more free advice than I should, but if somebody is doing this for a living or a side hustle or whatever, you need to just be willing to pay them something reasonable for their services. And so I've started off with like $500 consultation fee with this guy, so that he understands I'm serious about this and I'm not just wasting his time or taking advantage of his knowledge, because what he knows is worth something. So I've got him consulting on the project, and I'm also going to be hiring a engineering firm that does like studio design and listening room design and that sort of thing from a absolute scientific mathematical simulation method. We're not going to be guessing at this. We're not going to be using some rule of thumb or somebody saying, oh, you need a 1 by 1.4 by whatever, something ratio of rooms is ideal, and oh, go back to the Greek perfect thirds thing and all, yeah, we're not doing that. We're going to actually be using science and engineering to design the size of the room and the best way to do this. And it's going to be including the best bang for your buck wall construction and floor construction. And that's why I haven't decided on a slab versus a, crawl space kind of floor. Is I want to hear what these engineering guys say, or the plus and minuses of both. And if we do a crawl space, which honestly I would rather do, because you don't have to deal with digging up concrete if there's a problem with the plumbing and that sort of stuff on a building that's on a slab. And there is going to be some plumbing in here. And another advantage is I can put all the HVAC stuff under the building. And I don't want to do the mini splits. I think Ron at New Record Day did a mini split, and he actually shows in a video how many dBs of noise it makes. And from talking to folks, a way to get a really quiet HVAC system is you use oversized ducts in vents, which of course is more expensive, so they normally don't do that. But that slows down the air so that it's quieter, and then you can put the HVAC equipment under the building, way at the back under the workshop and away from the listening room, so that none of that equipment and the compressors and all that stuff will be outside at that end of the building, so that it makes it as quiet as possible. But that's something that I'm going to be using this engineering firm to help me kind of design how to do the HVAC system too, because Atlanta gets hot, gets cold. We want both. And I may even put a little wood burning stove out there. That would be kind of nice and cozy in the winter to be able to just get a little fire going and not even have HVAC running. And another really important thing to me on this project is it needs to be super energy efficient. And not only for acoustic reasons, but for extra insulation. Probably going to be building it with 2x6 studs to have thicker walls so we can put more insulation in them. And the listening room, I'm leaning towards the idea of having no windows in the room. From talking to these audio guys, just the initial conversation, they were saying that not having windows really simplifies not only the calculations, but just making the room good. And I know some people might be claustrophobic being in rooms with no windows or want some natural light in there. That's not a huge thing for me. And the other thing that I want to maybe look at is I've seen these things, I think they call them light domes. It's like a little dome that goes on the roof, and then it pipes in some natural light through. It almost looks like a light fixture in the ceiling, which shouldn't be acoustically any different than having a light fixture in the ceiling. So that may be a possibility. And the main thing about the energy efficiency is I don't want to have high energy bills or feel guilty about keeping that space heated and cooled when I'm not out there. And if it's super energy efficient and it's a nice tight room, and like I said, one big space of it's not going to even have any windows, it should be able to make it really energy efficient so that the energy bills will be minimal for that space. So those are kind of my starting points, and I have an appointment for someone to come out and do the survey kind of first thing. And that's kind of my first investment, is going to be getting this property surveyed and figure out where all the elevations are so we can understand what kind of dirt needs to be moved, figure out where all the trees are that are of any substantial size, and then probably going to have some sort of a, like right now there's no real landscaping out in the backyard and it's kind of a natural just woods, and I want to keep it like that. I don't want to have thorny grass back there to mow, don't want to have, I'm fine with it just being kind of a natural look back there, but we're probably going to have to clear out a little bit of some brush and stuff, especially so the construction stuff can, bobcats or whatever they're going to be using, can get back there and all that. I got to figure all that out. So between the survey, getting that figured out, and like I said, I've engaged this setup guy to kind of start helping me kind of think through this process. I'm working on getting a contract with these audio engineers that, a design team. So I make sure that I don't make a $100,000 mistake, because I think it would be foolish to, it may end up being $4,000 or $5,000 to have them do their thing to make sure that this space, scientifically is treatable, and to come up with a treatment plan as well. And, come up with a possibly, if the room's 16 by 22, you're going to have this kind of room treatment, but if it's 15 by 25, then it would be like this kind of thing, and figure out which of those ratios and stuff really work better, and talk to some other folks. I mean, if you've got knowledge about this stuff, not just I've got a room this size and it sounds good, because I know 15 by 20 room with a 10-foot ceiling probably can be made to work good. But if you've got some experience doing this stuff, and the other thing that I realize is you can't overtreat a space for listening, that you can make it too dead. And there's a real balance there of, you add treatment until it doesn't sound good, and then you take that last piece you put in out. I mean, I'm probably not going to just fully treat everything to start with. We talked about that with these engineers about coming up with a kind of a basic treatment plan, and then, here's some nice to have, and then here's the total package. And I can, if it sounds good to me with the basic treatment plan, we may stop there, because I may like a little livelier room than what might be considered ideal. And so that's going to be part of this whole journey too, is figuring out that balance. But just wanted to do a video kind of documenting these first steps. And here's a picture of a survey that was done when I bought the house back in 1985 that shows the property and that shows where the house is. And you can see I've got all this room in the backyard, and I can easily put like up to almost an 80-foot long building back there and still be within the building code. But I need to get the actual survey. It's pretty flat back there too. And there's a part that's kind of higher up than the main house that I think it would be good to build it on. So you don't have water drainage issues and that sort of thing. But that's going to be all part of this process. Because the other thing the planning department's going to look at is there is like an impervious surface ratio in most residential urban kind of areas that they won't let you go past. And I think in Doraville it's like 40% of the property, because they don't want you to cover up so much of the property with concrete and buildings and roofs and stuff that you create a stormwater runoff issue compared to your neighbors. Because if everybody had, 100% coverage instead of 40, it would double the load on the stormwater drain system in the city, which they're responsible for. And so you need to look at those limits too, and make sure that you've got enough acreage of land, and that you don't have already like so much driveway and concrete and stuff that you're going to run into that problem. So that's something else to consider. So anyway, that's kind of phase one of the design process. Oh, and I do have a really good architect that I need to sit down with him and figure out what his cost is going to be. And so it could be, I mean, I won't be shocked if 10% of the project is in the planning, engineering, and design before we even get started building anything. But I think that's better than saying, I don't want to spend that money and just send somebody out there to build something, and then when they're done with it, you go, hey, this sounds terrible. What am I going to do now? I think that would be a bigger mistake. So let me know what you think about my thoughts on this initial phase and the direction I'm heading. And hope y'all are going to enjoy this journey with me. I think this is going to be fun. And I feel like at the end of this, I'm going to be in a better place to be evaluating audio gear, trying out different speakers, having people come over that possibly want to demo gear that I'm selling, or listen to the combinations of stuff, have friends come over, have some club meetings over at my house and stuff to share my love of music and audio gear with other people. So that's kind of the end goal. Anyway, if you enjoy this content, please subscribe to the channel. Please like the video. Thanks for you Patreon supporters, other folks that support the channel in other ways. Until the next video, have a nice day.